We are live. It is 11:17 at night, but Penn State once again wins a stupid game. I tweeted, obviously was tweeting for BSD tweet, and tweeted the Groundhog Day clip from the movie, and it is just every single game. Like, can we just get a normal game? I guess UCLA was like a little bit normal as far as like this season goes, but man, every single game has just been something different, something new. This time, Penn State goes down, trails at halftime, 10-7. Drew Aller gets hurt on that final drive in the first half, hurts his knee, does stay in the game for 2 or 3 plays, but then hobbles off and is not able to play in the second half. In comes Beau Pribula, and once again, Penn State, some second half team magic, not just from Beau, but from the defense as well. I'm going all over the place. I'm mentioning all things. We're joined by Tim, as always, and we also have Ellie here as well. Let's start with Ellie, since he's on for the first time as this 3-man group. Ellie, what are your thoughts following Penn State's win to, I don't necessarily say like keep their playoff hopes alive, but we'll talk more about this. That's the Ohio State game next week. Certainly changes how we feel about it based upon if they had won this game or lost this game. So certainly a big win for Penn State.
Yeah, I think this is not the first time we've either said out loud or written in some post something along the lines of previous versions of Penn State would have lost this game.
Yeah.
We literally 2 weeks ago were sitting here talking about how previous versions of Penn State would not have come back from 14 down. We have a very specific previous version of Penn State who lost their starting quarterback and saw their entire season be ruined immediately after. And once again, this version of Penn State just finds a way to win. It definitely helps that Penn State's backup quarterback this time around doesn't suck. Not to insult any one individual out there, but it did take a little bit for Beau Pribula to get used to the offense. But once he did, they moved very well and scored 2 touchdowns along the way.
Yeah, and what Ellie is alluding to there was the Penn State Iowa game back in 2021. Penn State was humming along. I mean, it wasn't like a blowout, but Penn State was certainly trending in the right direction with Sean Clifford on the road at Iowa. He gets hurt, and the rest with Taquan Roberson, who's now the backup quarterback at Kansas State, by the way, still kicking around. Came in and just quite couldn't put things together. I think one of the big, as Ellie mentioned, Beau came in and right away it wasn't as clean as maybe we all were hoping for. But Jalen Reed comes through with a pick 6 that puts Penn State in the lead. And I think that probably, for Beau in particular, kind of calmed things down. And then, okay, Penn State has a lead now and gave him the confidence moving forward. So, Tim, just overall thoughts on that game. And we'll get into each thing. We'll talk about Beau. We'll talk about Drew. We'll talk about, everything that you can imagine. But just kind of just your main thoughts coming out of that game.
Well, as I talked about when we went off the air after the post-game show, or no, the previous show earlier this week, I dug up my Squid Game costume from my closet, and yes. I think it's for Halloween. I think it's quite fitting because for a good chunk of that game, I felt like I was flirting with death.
This entire season. Entire
season, really. It's a great metaphor for this entire season. Like, we've it's just been death-defying win after death-defying win. It seems like we're in real trouble. They just find a way to pull it out. And so obviously when things were not going quite so well in the first half, which isn't new, but I'm thinking first drive of the game, you have Wisconsin, should have had a 3 and out right off the bat. Instead, they converted 3rd and 15 down the guts, and then their punter, which wasn't even the design fake. But I think Jalen Kimber
it was Kimber
over pursued a bit too much, and instead of tackling the punter when he was taking off, just kind of let him go and then pick up the first down. And so that led to 3 points.
I will defend Kimber in this sense. I don't know if either of you played College Football 25 But that's like me when I'm like in the open field, like trying to tackle a guy. It's just like I just go like sprinting at him and then somehow run right past him. It's literally what Kimber looked like. And that's like, how much does Penn State practice that as far as like with, blocking punts and stuff like that, just because it could be more of a dangerous play? I mean, I know they practice blocking punts, but in that type of scenario where it was like such a, like nobody even touched Kimber, like he could have literally just tackled the punter. But anyway, Tim, didn't want to cut you off.
So anyway, that happened. They got 3 points out of it, and then we come down. Penn State comes down, and looks like they're just looking smooth. I mean, Drew is slinging it across the yard, and Katron Allen appears to have picked up an easy first down. I didn't realize until like a play later that they didn't give him the first down, even though I'm sure if you go back and watch, I mean, I remember he clearly was past the yellow line on your screen, and yet they somehow marked him short. And then, of course, at least a 3rd and 1 situation where Drew finds wide open Julian Fleming, who came up with a couple huge catches on 4th down against USC on the game tying drive, which ultimately led them to win in overtime. And he had plenty of grass in front of him, maybe not to pick up a touchdown, but would have at least maybe had him out of bounds 1st and goal. But he did not secure the ball before taking off and ends up with a bad drop, and then of course they fail to convert the 4th and 1. They fumble the snap. So you see that happen. And then the rest of the first half, the offense just seemed kind of out of sync, but just like, seemed like the receivers weren't able to get open. Drew had plenty of time to throw. Most of the time he stepped back, but no one's getting open. They weren't getting much out of the ground game. The Badgers doing a good job of holding that in check. Nick Singleton, had a great touchdown catch, by the way, on that first scoring drive, but just looked a little out of sorts still. I don't know what's going on with him. Clearly doesn't look like he's 100%. Again, he did enough to contribute, but would have liked to see a little more. So then just the offense is looking a bit out of sorts. And meanwhile, Wisconsin comes down. They take the lead of a touchdown. We're down at halftime. Everyone's panicking. And of course, some people were reminding everyone, hey, we're a second half team. Of course, by this point, we find out Drew Hour's not going to play the rest of the game because of his knee. And it's going to be the Beau Pribula show. And of course, on that first drive, we're all having flashbacks to, the 2021 Iowa game, as you all alluded to. And I certainly was braced. At that point, I was kind of bracing myself for the worst. But thank goodness the defense came up in the clutch with that pick 6 from Jalen Reed.
Just to stop you, Tim, just because I want to go back to the first half, just before we get into the second half. You kind of mentioned before, just like that first drive for Wisconsin, where Penn State's able to, quite honestly, they look dominant, and same for Penn State's offense on that first drive, where they're moving the ball down the field. I only know this because I tweeted out for, once again, BSD. Penn State was averaging like 8.2 yards per play in the first quarter. Wisconsin was averaging like 3.4, and yet that score was 3-0 Wisconsin, which was just kind of really just set the stage for, I mean, really a lot of Penn State season, but this game in particular. So, Ellie, what were your thoughts in that first quarter, and let's even say most of the second quarter? Obviously, those last 4 minutes where Penn State gives up a touchdown and Drew gets hurt, I think everybody kind of started, whatever level of panic that there certainly was some. But what were your thoughts that the first 75% of the first half? Because I think by and large, Penn State fans were thinking, this is kind of going how maybe not everybody expected, but honestly par for the course for this Penn State team, where slow start as far as where the score goes, but water always finds its level. Were you kind of thinking that's how it was going to go for Penn State with Drew if he would have stayed healthy?
Yeah, so I normally write the takeaways right after the game, and one of the points that I ended up rewriting based on what actually happened in the second half, but like one of the things that I wrote about the first half was you kind of got the feeling that the first quarter was a mirage, and that Penn State could move the ball very easily, but just those few miscues with Fleming dropping would be touchdown if he actually keeps going, and the fumble and the immediate play after. But it looked like Wisconsin like had to work for every yard that they were getting at the same time. So you kind of knew that eventually that was going to even out in favor of the team that was moving the ball. I also had mentioned earlier in the week that the game to me felt a lot like the Ohio State game that Wisconsin played last year, where it was a very close game for the first half. Wisconsin even tied it to start the second, and then Ohio State took over in the second half. So like that's kind of how I felt in the first half, knowing how the game was going. I wasn't that concerned. The concern really came once the players started dropping right at the end of the first half, and things started to look a little dicey. It was even worse when Wisconsin went on to take the lead. But like, I wasn't I wasn't scared. I was just annoyed that they that we were gonna have to see the same thing that we've seen in the past, where like they're just gonna have to take over in the second half, which they did. But yeah, so to directly answer your question, I wasn't really concerned because the way that I saw the game playing out, Wisconsin was going to be able to keep up throughout an entire game.
Yeah, just how Drew looked in that first half, and certainly, like I was saying, like the beginning part of the second quarter, I even tweeted out that it was like, not to, because I like whisper tweeted out because I didn't want to say it too loudly, but it's like he might like really have it tonight. Like, this might be like a 24 for 27 type game because it just felt like he was seeing the whole field and was just making good throws and just was in such command of the offense and so confident. Obviously, things slowed up as the second quarter went along, and before Drew got hurt, the offense certainly wasn't humming along the same way that they were. But yeah, so let's just talk about the Drew injury for now, and we'll talk a little bit about Ohio State, but I obviously want most of this. I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but we can save the Ohio State talk for later this week, and we can talk about, the long-term effects of Drew's injury. Obviously, we don't know much of anything about it. He tried to got sacked at the end of the second quarter, twisted his left knee, played a couple plays in that, and then went off, tried to come out during warmups, during halftime, and give it a go. And they showed on the TV that he wasn't able to. Went over, talked to Franklin, had some tears, obviously, was frustrated and talked with the team. And this had to go to Beau Pribula, which, as we mentioned before, brought up, anytime Penn State goes to the backup quarterback since the 2021 Iowa game, that's just naturally what happens. If the quarterback doesn't come in and throw 75-yard touchdown right away, it's like, here we go again. What were your thoughts going into that second half with Beau as the quarterback? And I know it can be tough, like even for myself, like what was I actually truly thinking? Because as Ellie mentioned, there was just like a general annoyance about like, we shouldn't even be down 10-7. Like this should be like a 17-7 type game, even like give Beau like a nice lead as he comes in. And instead, he came into a situation where they were trailing. So, Tim, what were your thoughts with Beau coming in? I don't think any of us expected this per se, Beau going 11-13 for 98 yards and running the ball the way that he did. But what were your thoughts on Penn State's chances to win with Drew out? Because if I'm being honest with myself, I don't think that it was very high for me, as painful as it is, because I do love Beau.
No, like I said, I think I said earlier, I was definitely bracing myself for the worst when Beau came in, and it's not to knock Beau. I mean, he's they've been included in some packages and stuff this year, but it's a little different when you're the starter, you're the full-time starter at that point because your starter now is hurt, and so now the playbook has to change up too. And I mean, all the credit in the world to Andy Kotelnicki. I mean. Yeah. Dude earned his paycheck, and just back up the freaking Brinks truck for him at this point because he really crafted together. I mean, he changed up the offense to fit Beau's running ability, and also gave Beau some it gave him some makeable throws. He didn't have him try to, throw some darts down, chuck it deep or anything like that. But he set Beau up with some, makeable throws. And I'll say both. There was one play, I forget what it was, but he threw a nice dart down the middle. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, it's a throw that Drew makes all the time, but Beau did that. And then I think it was on the last scoring drive. He gets hit, or he's about to get hit, but he just stays steady in the pocket and just fires away, hits his receiver just as he's getting hit. And that helped move the chains. That ultimately led to Katron Allen's basically game-sealing touchdown. But I'll say the beginning for the first drive when it wasn't looking so good, I was bracing for the worst. It felt like a pseudo version of 2021 Iowa, except there was no lead to blow because Penn State was already trailing at that point, 10-7. But I mean, really, the pick. I think maybe we'll talk about the defense more, but I think that pick six really changed everything. I mean, big difference when Beau's in there and he just has to manage with a lead as opposed to having to lead the team downfield trailing. Like, I think it just took some of the pressure off of Beau, and like he knew he has great teammates around him that he can work with. He's got a great coordinator, great, QB coach with Danny O'Brien. That's, he was just able to, I think, settle down after that pick six and just kind of, manage the game, which is precisely what he did. I mean, look at that stat line of his: 11 to 13, 98 yards, touchdown, 6 carries for 28 yards. I mean, he, once he calmed down, I think that pick six really helped him kind of, he was pretty much pressing all the right buttons.
Certainly so. Ellie, same question for you. What were your thoughts, as far as confidence goes in Beau going into the second half? Obviously, before you mentioned that you were, annoyed with Penn State, which I think, most Penn State fans were certainly annoyed with Penn State at halftime. But with Beau coming in, and I don't know, that probably that like feeling that like snowball effect of just like bad things happening to Penn State, because you mentioned before guys getting injured. Deni Denison also got injured towards the end of the first half as well. So with Beau coming in, where was your confidence at in Penn State ultimately winning this game?
I wasn't that sure after the first drive where it looked bleak. But immediately after, the thing that I did notice is that the defense, like even before the interception, Wisconsin couldn't get much done. And even on the drive before the interception, Penn State got good field position, and had the interception not happened, they would have needed to punt from their end zone. So the way that I felt at that point was that it was going to be one of those situations where eventually Penn State was going to score because they're getting the ball so close to the end zone as it is, that it was going to be a matter of time. The pick six accelerated that process, and then the team just started playing off each other. Because I did notice that the types of plays in the first, I think it was 2 drives that were that the cause for concern, and in the subsequent 2 drives, the plays actually were a little bit more different in that Korolnicki had more motions in the successful drives than he did in the previous 2, which is what kept Wisconsin basically unable to keep everything in front of them. So, all things consistent, I kind of felt like eventually they were going to be able to move the ball some. I don't know if I would have said that they would be able to move the ball to the tune of 14 points, but at least enough to get the lead. The pick six kind of just helped accelerate that process, but I just didn't think that Wisconsin was going to be able to do anything on offense, because the first 3 drives basically showed that like the running game just wasn't there. And one of the things that, if we were talking about that flashback to 2021, one of the things that helped Iowa was that although they didn't light it up, they at least they could still move the ball. Wisconsin couldn't.
Yeah, so let's actually just talk about the defense, and we can come back and talk, more about the offense. I want to talk about, the way that that Penn State was able to run the ball with Beau. One of the additions of having Beau in there was that the running game did get going a little bit more, and just overall, just the way that Penn State was able to open up get the ball to different receivers. Last time we talked was Tyler Warren making 700 catches. This week that definitely saw like a more distribution of wealth as far as the receivers go. But let's talk a little bit about the defense, just because, if Beau is the one of the major takeaways in the second half, the defense is, right there with him as far as major main takeaways for Penn State and why Penn State was able to win this game. Not that the defense even played bad in the first half, as Ellie was just alluding to there. They gave up 10 points, which, ideally they don't give up that touchdown on the, right before halftime. But all things considered, I thought the defense did play pretty well in the first half, but they came out in the second half and really, really just dominated. So, Tim, thoughts on Tom Allen, who continues to make me extremely frustrated when the game first begins. Although I can't necessarily blame him today. Like the Wisconsin converting the not the fake punt, but the missed block punt. I can't fully blame Tom Allen, but continues to make me mad when the game starts. But then somehow,
you can blame what's his face, Justin Lustig, the special.
True, he first Lustig actually here. So thoughts on the defense?
No, I think the defense, look, we held them to 13 points. And I know they were ahead at halftime, but they only had 10 points on the scoreboard. And of course, they were their usual lockdown selves in the second half, held them to just a field goal, which frankly, if it wasn't for a just absolute stupid taunting call, I think, who could have scored Catron, I think, scored a touchdown. Or not Kate, but whenever they score the touchdown to go up 21-14. Sorry, no, I'm sorry for the pick six.
Yeah,
after the pick six, they called taunting on.
Do we know what he did, by the way? The only thing they showed,
he just handed the ball to some. I don't even think he was actually taunting anybody.
Which I imagine was his family. That's what I thought. I thought it was his mom or.
Yeah, it just sounded like he was handing the ball to or something like an. Apparently that's enough to be taunting. Give me a freaking break. But anyway, that gave Wisconsin good field position because they had to kick off from their own 20 and Wisconsin started from their own 38. And then they did get a nice deep pass to get into field goal range. But that penalty doesn't happen. Perhaps they shut them out in the second half. But really, I think the only thing that annoyed me with Tom Allen was just giving up that 3rd and 15 on the very first drive, which they should have had a 3 and out there to begin the game. But that's me kind of nitpicking because really they got points from that fake punt, or not fake punt, but what ended up being a fake punt. And so overall, look, actually I pulled up my X Factors post from yesterday, and I want to read this verbatim. It's short enough, but one of my X factors was make Braden Locke beat you. And I wrote here, Penn State's defense absolutely feasts on one-dimensional offenses. So if they can slow down Tawee Walker in the Wisconsin run game, it presents a golden opportunity to tee off on Braden Locke, who has struggled mightily this season when facing pressure and has thrown an interception in each of his last 3 games. If Penn State can build up to a 2-score lead and force the Badgers to have to throw it around in order to get back in the game, it should bode well for the Nittany Lions. Well, that certainly came to fruition, I would say. They kept Tawee Walker in check, 22 carries, 59 yards, averaged less than 3 yards a carry. As a result, his longest game was only 12 yards. So I remember seeing a stat. They flashed it right around the end of the game. In the second half, Penn State outrushed Wisconsin 104-10. And they were, once they had that lead after that pick six, it seemed like they were able, once the defense was starting to really tee off on Locke, they were able to just tiger down that Wisconsin defense and just what were just like 1 to 3 yard gains suddenly turned into like 6, 7, 8 yard gains, and they were just gradually wearing them down. And I think that 24-yard touchdown run from Katron Allen was like the final knockout blow to them. So, I mean, it came back to Penn State was able to take away Wisconsin's run game, and eventually they were able to just kind of tee off on Locke and force him to make some bad throws or untimely throws, and of course the pick six, obviously, which I think was an absolute game changer.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about in our previous show was making Braden Locke uncomfortable. Even if Penn State wasn't able to get home, which they were not really able to do tonight, I don't think they even had any sacks off the top of my head. And I don't say per usual because Penn State's defensive line has.
They didn't have a sack.
Good. They didn't have a sack. No, I didn't think so. But even though they weren't able to do that, and I mean, we'll see what the pressure stats are as far as how many QB hurries or QB knockdowns they have, but it certainly didn't seem very high. But even though they weren't necessarily able to do that, they were able to, just get him off a little bit. And even Todd Blackledge mentioned at one point during the broadcast about that clock in Locke's head kind of being sped up. And that's how you saw some of those throws that, were just kind of off target or weren't on time or were short. And that's, just knowing what the Penn State defense was potentially bringing at him and, certainly confusing. You would see, Jalen Reed as we saw with the pick six, but even beyond the pick six, him lining up all over the place, coming up to line of scrimmage and then backing off, him, being, back in the secondary and coming off on blitz and stuff like that. So, certainly not, I was just joking before about Tom Allen's frustrating, first half defenses, but, much better today, I think, in a normal game. You certainly don't want to give up that touchdown before halftime, but all in all, good things, and stepped up in the second half. Like we are, saying that pick six really changed things for I think the Penn State team as a whole and changed the mindset for Beau and just for everyone that this was not going to be Iowa 2021 levels of pathetic. So. Just real quick, and we can go back to talk about this game, but I did see that during Franklin's press conference, he talked about Drew. This is from Johnny McConaughey he's at Penn Live nowadays. At Penn Live, James Franklin was asked if Drew Aller not returning was out of precaution. Franklin said he wouldn't describe it that way. This is a quote. Really, it came down to Drew. I asked him to be very, very honest with me, and we just didn't feel like he was going to be able to move well enough. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically what we all thought, and who knows what that means for Ohio State. I think it's anyone's guess as to whether he'll be ready or not. But like I mentioned before, we can, we'll have plenty of time to talk about Drew at blackshoediaries.com and certainly here on the YouTube channel.
When we do a preview on Wednesday night, we'll have a practice report and we'll have a better idea of what Drew's of potential availability could look like. So.
Certainly so.
I want to just do one more point on the defense before we move on. For those of you who love the Manny Diaz defenses, we almost had a Manny Diaz-esque game because from my count, there were 3 dropped interceptions and a 4th one that was caught out of bounds. Yep. So if our defenders stop having bricks for hands, this game could have gotten out of hand a lot sooner than it did.
And as you mentioned, I was just going to say, even as far as Manny Diaz defenses go, Penn State didn't get any sacks, but they get 5 tackles for loss, and certainly did a tremendous job with stopping Tolly Walker. Alonzo Ford, just a great day. Zane Duran was in the backfield as well, so just a dominant effort all around.
Yeah, the last thing to go along with Tim's point, there was a point in the second half where Wisconsin had -2 yards rushing. That's how good a job the defense did stopping what was working for the Badgers.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely so. Man, I'm like, now that this is all sitting in, I'm just very, very, I don't want to say surprised, but just the way that game ended, I certainly thought that it was going to be, I don't want to say Well, okay, I do want to say I thought it was going to be more stressful than it was at the end. Like even I was writing the recap for BSD, and I'm not great at like writing the recap and watching the games. Like I just need to focus completely on the game, and then I take 10 minutes and when the game ends, and usually write the recap. Unless it's a game that Penn State is fully in control in, and once Katron Allen scored that touchdown. If you would have told me coming out of halftime or after those first two Beau drives where Penn State doesn't score any points that Penn State would win this game by 2 touchdowns, by 15 points, I don't think I would have believed you. So really just a credit to, I mean, certainly a credit to Beau, but just, James Franklin gets a lot of flack as, I mean, we saw this week, James Franklin got some flack for things that he said or didn't say, but obviously James Franklin gets a lot of flack for the 10-2 stuff and not getting Penn State over the hump and the great to elite and whatnot. But this is the type of game where you lose Denai Dennison, you lose your starting quarterback, you lose AJ Harris towards the end of the game as well. You're already without KJ.
Anthony Donko.
Yeah, you lose your right tackle, Anthony Donko, and you're still able to pull away from. I know Wisconsin isn't like it's not the Barry Alvarez or the Brett Bielema of Wisconsin at this point. Luke Fickell's still building it up himself, but to be able to pull away from Wisconsin in a primetime kick with just all the injuries that were happening, not to make excuses, but with all the injuries that were happening, it's just a credit to what James Franklin has built at Penn State. The fact that they have the depth that they can withstand, that you have Nolan Rucci, oddly enough, from Wisconsin that can come in and play right tackle, that you're able to keep Pribula around in this era of the transfer portal. So just as this is all setting in now, the fact that Penn State is the caliber of program where they can take these hits and are still able to pull away from a solid team, a team that is, very, very likely to make a bowl game. So yeah, just certainly don't take that for granted. And I know that you two certainly don't, but just saying that for everyone listening as well.
Can I say something real quick on that same note?
Absolutely.
Ever since enough teams lost for Penn State to sneak their way into the top 5, we've heard nothing but, sure, they're ranked but they're not a top 5 team from the masses at large. And I keep kind of wondering, okay, they're not a top 5 team, yet all of these teams ranked above them keep losing, and Penn State finds ways to win. So at what point do you just accept that this is what top 5 teams do? Maybe if you accept Penn State for what it is, as opposed to trying to pigeonhole them into your version of what a top 5 team should look like, you kind of would come to the conclusion that this is what top 5 teams look like now. And not to
look at Ohio State. They similar kind of game.
Texas, Vanderbilt, close game as well.
Yes.
Vanderbilt's a big team, but similar. I mean, I would say Vanderbilt's better than Wisconsin, but similar idea. So, yeah, certainly is the case that, as Tim and I have been saying for weeks and weeks, and I know Ellie, you were on the USC postgame show. We certainly said it as well. Every team is flawed. There's no perfect team out there. There's no, looking back, the 2019 LSU team. There's no 2001 Miami. There's no, whatever team you want to say. There's no Bama. The Saban Bama teams back in the 2010s. Every team is flawed. We, as Penn State fans, can sometimes look at things in like a warped way, depending upon your perspective of things. I know. Once again, I want to speak of Ellie, but I know that Ellie, you're more of like an optimistic, positive guy. But I certainly know there's Penn State fans out there. I see it on Twitter all the time that everything is always doom and gloom, and that just, as we see, this isn't necessarily the case. Penn State 7-0, ranked number 3, and that's kind of what I was thinking when Penn State. It was just like, just win this game. Who even cares if we drop in the rankings? And then you see it's like, oh well, the teams below us, Ohio State, also struggled today at home against a fine, okay Nebraska team, and Texas also, I wouldn't say they struggled with Vanderbilt. They were up for most of the game, but certainly weren't able to pull away. So, yeah, everyone is flawed and everyone kind of stinks, but at least Penn State's stink is 7-0 and not 6-1.
Not 6-1.
Yeah, not 6-1, not 5-2, not 4-3, or whatever it might be. So good all around. What else do you guys want to talk about? I mean, we can talk about I just want to give a shout out to just the receivers. I mean, Julian Fleming obviously had that drop, which got a lot of hate on Twitter. But Trey Wallace had a really nice day, 5 receptions for 67 yards. He continues to be a really, really solid wide receiver. Tyler Warren, not as used as he was in the USC game, which is probably for the best, because I don't know if you want him having 20 plus, touches every single game. He had 7 receptions for 46 yards, so only 6.6 yards per reception, but certainly a couple big catches. Liam Clifford, 3 catches for 40 yards. Khalil Dinkins, all he does is catch touchdowns. That is, I'm going to look it up here real quick.
That's all he does, and hey, he can, I'm quite fine with that being all somebody does.
Sorry, that is it looks like his 5th touchdown. No, sorry, it's just his 4th touchdown. His 4th career touchdown out of 12 catches. So all he does is catch touchdowns. What other thoughts do you guys have? Sorry, I'm just rambling on about the receivers. Anything else that we can talk about?
I mean, talking about this quickly on Tyler Warren. I mean, I know Wisconsin is obviously they're game planning to hold him in check, but they really did a good job just kind of shifting around, or just at the very last second, just like getting him the ball, like those shovel passes. Like they weren't telegraphing that before the snap. It was kind of like last second. They would just feed it to Warren, and it kind of would catch him a bit off guard. That's how he was able to ramble for big games. Although there were a couple times where Wisconsin knew exactly what was coming, and he still pick up several yards. Just such a behemoth. There's only so much that opposing teams can do. But he still, even though it was more quiet on the stat sheet, he still played a huge role tonight offensively. And he should be a consideration for a Heisman.
Yeah. I want to ramble on a little more about the there are no elite teams thing. I've been thinking about this for the past couple of weeks, and I have started to appreciate Penn State's approach to NIL and the transfer portal. The Penn State focuses on retention more so than acquisition when it comes to their NIL efforts. And, when NIL and the transfer portal first emerged, a lot of people made these grand predictions that like the system was going to be upended and the Akrons of the world were suddenly going to compete. Those were foolish, but lost in that grandiose prediction was that the system was going to be upended somewhat, but the way in which it would be upended is that the Georgias of the world and the Alabamas of the world, the teams that were just stockpiling talent and just keeping it there for years and years on end, we're going to start losing that talent to the other schools that also had enough, but just needed those extra pieces. I mentioned this on the mailbag for the bye week. Like AJ Harris was a 3rd stringer at Georgia, and now he's a star player at Penn State.
Yeah.
Caleb Johnson is the other one. Caleb Downs was a star at Alabama, and now he's a star at Ohio State. And so many other. Diego Pavia is putting Vanderbilt on the map, and he's from New Mexico State. The reason why there are no elite teams is that, as with everything, when something changes so drastically, it takes a little bit of time for things to catch up. We're seeing the talent start to be spread around, not necessarily to the teams that never had a shot, Vanderbilt accepted, but to the other teams that were just below. Now they're starting to elevate a little bit more. And what that means is Georgia now looks mortal, Texas looks mortal, Alabama looks very mortal, but the teams below them look like they can compete. So I think that's another kind of way to think about, no one really is elite because Alabama now has an 85% blue chip ratio instead of like a 92% blue chip ratio, which actually makes a big difference. So that combined with the 12-team playoff kind of creates what I didn't think I'd be saying right now, and actually much more fun season than I thought we would have. If you're a proponent of the 12-team playoff, this is the kind of stuff that you would hope actually happen, because at least as of October 26th at 11:57 p.m. Eastern, I can't tell you that anyone is going to go into the playoff and just ripped
Stormroll
3-4 wins and win the national title right now.
Well, even the weird thing, not the weird thing, but the interesting thing with this 12-team playoff, and I know I keep saying we're not going to talk about Ohio State. We'll talk about it later this week, but I am going to talk about Ohio State here, is that in previous seasons, everything would be coming down to this game next week for Penn State, right? Penn State would need to beat Ohio State, because if we don't beat Ohio State, or Penn State doesn't beat Ohio State, they can't go to the Big Ten championship. You don't get the Big Ten championship, you're not making the playoff. More likely than not, unless you're Ohio State, then you can make the playoff. But that aside, you need to win the Big Ten. You need to beat Ohio State to make the playoff. It would just be a very interesting situation where Penn State's at, with this the Drew injury and just kind of the rest of the injuries that Penn State has. But now all of a sudden, Penn State's sitting at 7-0. They will be, once again, we don't know anything about this Drew injury, but my guess is that they're still favored in every single game that they play outside of Ohio State. That game all of a sudden next week, I'm not trying to say it's not a big game. It absolutely is, but it's no longer like make or break for Penn State. And as much as I do loved college football for the fact that the regular season kind of was serving as the playoff itself, that every game mattered so much. You especially back in the BCS days, you couldn't lose a game and just automatically assume that everything was going to be okay. SEC aside, I guess, towards the end there, the SEC champ always was making it. But, certainly nice for Penn State now to be in this position where you're not really sure how healthy your team is going to be next week, and specifically Drew, and that if that is a win, great. If it's a loss, it doesn't completely kill your season. Will I come on here and be, I'll be shirtless. Will I come on here and be shirtless and be angry if Penn State loses or upset or disappointed? Absolutely, 100%. But it's not that's it, season's over type thing, or at least it shouldn't be. And that's all thanks to Penn State winning today, beating Wisconsin. So, just wanted to point that out about the 12-team playoff, just as we're rambling on here. We're going into up until the 43-minute mark. Tim, you want to talk about Zach's comment here? Zach,
yes, we sort of touched on it, but Zach makes a really good point. They're winning games that I think you've said. This is a game just like this in the USC game 2 weeks ago. Those are games that historically, we end up losing. That goes beyond James Franklin. This goes back to like the Paterno era, I feel, and so great teams. Teams that are really worth the hype they're getting. They find ways to just pull out those kinds of games. And, back-to-back games now, Penn State has faced some serious adversity on the road and has rallied to, get a couple of critical wins. And now here we are. We're undefeated going into November with flash against Ohio State. And, look, we said, Pat, lose that game. I think everyone's probably expecting that, going to predict that, and it's okay. It almost feels like they're going to be playing with house money next week in a way, because you're expected to lose that anyway. I said 11-1 my preseason prediction, and that was predicated on losing to Ohio State. The rest of the schedule of that, and we'll get into that more, I'm sure, on Wednesday.
A lot of it depends upon Drew's health as well. I think that if Penn State comes out here and let's just say that Drew stays healthy during this game and Penn State's able to win. Let's even say it was 35-10 instead of 20-13, right? They were able to pull away a little bit more, and whatever. Maybe we're thinking about that Ohio State game a little bit differently. But just with the Drew's injury being up in the air, I don't know. It changes things for next week just because, yes, Drew, total cutie pie, great job tonight. He's our baby. He's it, baby. Love him so much. I don't know how confident I feel about Beau going into the Ohio State game. I mean, we'll see. I'm not saying that Penn State gets blown out by any means if Beau's the starter. Some of those throws tonight were amazing and great in very tight windows. The thing about tight windows, though, the difference between a great throw and a stupid throw is milliseconds.
How tight the window is.
yeah, how tight that window is. And it's a little bit different when you're throwing. Wisconsin, good defense, but as Ellie mentioned before, Caleb Downs at safety for Ohio State is a little bit different. So once again, as I keep on saying, we'll talk more about that next week. Go ahead, Ellie.
I did see another one of Ohio State's linemen go down and not come back. I'm not sure if that player will be available next week. I guess
I believe if we're talking the same player. So they lost their starting left tackle last week, and now this was their backup left tackle that went down I think it was the fourth quarter of the game. Yeah. So we'll see.
It is possible they're down to their third stringer at left tackle. So it at worst, we might be talking about a game that looks a lot similar to what we had last year. But hopefully the 20 is on Penn State's side and not the other.
We'll see. Hopefully, the quarter didn't have any sacks tonight, so he has to get some at some point. So hopefully next week if he's lined up along that side. Tim, do you want to read Brian's comment?
Yeah, always necessary to make the playoffs. However, we can put a lineman in motion and flatten referring to JT Tuimoloau, who absolutely game wrecked Penn State a couple years ago in a tight game.
It feels unfair that he's still around. I feel like this shouldn't be allowed. I understand. I believe he's only a true senior, but come on.
I'd say, I think JT Tuimoloau, I think he and Vega are both from Washington State. I mean, get Vega to go in motion and flatten him. I'm all for it.
All right, fella. Oh,
sorry.
I think we closed that both at the same time. Anyway, I think we're wrapping up here, going on 47 minutes. It is technically also the next day, at least for those of us here on the East Coast. Any final thoughts from either of you? Give you the stage.
Just, I was riding a roller coaster of emotions. I'll say, you go from like hope to despair, then some hope again, trying to get my hopes up too high. But as the game goes on and defense is just locking down and the offense is just running on them, I don't know. This kind of felt like a Penn State basketball game in a way, like one where they pull off a huge win. Ellie's smiling. He knows what I'm talking about. He and I both being, you too, Pat. We're all Penn State hoops sickos. So
you guys certainly more sickos than me. I'm like moderate sicko. You guys are like disgusting.
We're all in on the sickos part.
I can't do it to that level.
By the way, I didn't realize. It's sneaking up on us, but hoop season
it's like 9 days away.
November 4th. Yeah,
coming up. I also say you mentioned like the despair and everything you were feeling. There's also some sadness. Like when Drew got hurt, it honestly was just like. There's one thing for Penn State to lose. You hate to lose in a way where it's like your quarterback goes down and is hurt.
It would be like Ace Baldwin going down with an injury, and then us wondering what's his availability going to be like.
So that sadness then turned to much happiness with Beau coming in and doing his thing. Ellie, final thoughts on Penn State being 7-0.
The funniest thing is going to be when Penn State couldn't make the 14 playoff for 10 straight years, then turns around and gets a first round bye in the first year where they didn't need to do that to make the playoff.
I'll say this because we won, but the two funniest outcomes was either that or Penn State going 10-2 and coming and getting the 13 seed, like just being like the first one out. Either side of the spectrum. No, but not funny. I guess only.
Don't speak it into existence.
I was gonna say only funny for me in a sicko type of way.
We were exercising those 10-2 demons. I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
Injuries be damned.
doing the best we can. Check in subscribers. We had 100 subscribers. Ooh, we're at 104 subscribers now. I mentioned that I would take my shirt off when we hit 100 subscribers. I did not do it today. I'm saving it for Ohio State. That was an executive decision. It was the Ohio State game last year that I had my shirt off. I will take my shirt off next week for the Ohio State game. So whether it's a win or a loss, I will be shirtless because that honestly will be my preferred ethos. I might be on the floor as well. I might not be sitting in a seat. I might also have the lights off. I'll be in like a dark room. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Don't know what this game is going to be like. We don't even know who's going to be at freaking quarterback. So taking it day by day. Make sure you're subscribing. If you're not subscribed, though, we're at 104 subscribers right now, and I'm reloading it as we speak, and we're still at 104 subscribers. This is really a shame. I was kind of hoping that once I refresh, we'd be at 105, but that's fine. Please subscribe on the YouTube channel, which you are watching right now. So just click subscribe. It's real easy. You can know when we're going live. We go live on Wednesdays. We go live, obviously, after games. Make sure you're reading our stuff at blackstreetdiaries.com. Make sure that you are following the blog at BSD Tweet. You can see our Twitter handles in our on the screen as well if you want to follow us. Thank you for following along. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Jess. You're great. All right. We will see you Wednesday as we preview Ohio State. Maybe we'll no, I'm not going to finish that sentence. I was going to say something about Drew. I'm not going to say anything about Drew. We will see you on Wednesday when we are previewing Ohio State.
Good man.